All right, buckle up because for this deep dive, you guys have sent us down a rabbit hole, like biblical proportions, literally.
Yeah.
We're talking about Adam and Eve, but not the Adam and Eve story you're used to.
Yeah.
We've got ancient cataclysms thrown in, lost civilizations, and, just to spice things up, a declassified CIA document.
It's like someone took history, mythology, maybe a dash of science fiction, shook it all up, and dumped it right here on our table.
And you know we love a good mystery, so let's dig in. You sent us excerpts from, this is a mouthful, The Adam and Eve Story by Chen Thomas, published back in 1963.
Okay.
Now, Thomas was an electrical engineer who, for whatever reason, took a sharp turn into, and I love this, cataclysmic geology.
Interesting.
Right. But the first thing that caught my eye was the dedication. It's dedicated to Wayo.
Yeah.
Wayo. Any ideas?
No.
I mean, either. It's like, who is this mysterious Wayo?
Yeah.
And it only gets wilder from there. The table of contents reads like a summer blockbuster movie marathon. The next cataclysm, the great floods, the event, even a chapter just called Genesis. But here's the twist. Thomas seems to be saying that Adam and Eve weren't the first humans at all. He thinks they were survivors of some massive global disaster about 11,500 years ago.
Okay, so he's basically saying Genesis got it wrong.
Well, not exactly wrong. More like misinterpreted or maybe even mistranslated. Like there's a hidden meaning buried within the text.
A secret code. I like it.
Right. And we're not talking about a little backyard flood here. Thomas is talking walls of water, miles high, continents rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces, poles switching places like it's nothing. We are talking full-on apocalypse.
And to really set the stage for all this, he even provides a chart, lays out all the past North Polar eras. But what really got me was how recent some of these eras were, 6,500 and 11,500 years ago. I mean, that's not that long ago.
Wow. 11,500 years ago. That's what early civilizations just starting to pop up, weren't they?
Exactly. We're talking the Younger Dryas, that period of sudden climate change around 12,000 years ago, the end of the last ice age. Mammoths were still roaming around.
No way.
Imagine the possibility of like massive global upheaval right when humans are starting to figure things out. Whether it happened the way Thomas describes or through some other geological process, it's a wild thing to think about.
It really is. Okay, now for real curveball, you also sent a declassified CIA document.
Oh, here we go.
It's a sanitized copy of the Adam and Eve story itself, approved for release just about a decade ago, 2013.
Now, why would the CIA be interested in a book about biblical cataclysms? What do you make of that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Intelligence agencies, they're known to, dabble in all sorts of things. Some a little more out there than others. Maybe they were interested in Thomas's, let's say, unique geological theories. Or maybe they were thinking about potential global disruption scenarios, the kind of stuff that could really shake things up on a global scale. Who knows?
So many possibilities. Okay, ready for another curveball? You also included a 1966 Time magazine article. It's about all these newly independent nations.
Right.
And they're trying to build themselves up, dealing with nationalism, all this political turmoil. On the surface, totally unrelated. But you see a connection, don't you?
Right.
It's the timing. Think about it. Thomas says these cataclysmic shifts happen every few thousand years, right? And if he's right about that timeline, well, the last one would have been right around the time these new nations were just getting started.
Whoa. You're saying those events could have shaped human history as we know it?
Maybe even the very formation of our political systems. It definitely makes you wonder.
Makes you wonder what happened to those early civilizations, what they knew, what was lost, what was passed down. It's like we're missing huge chunks of the story.
I'm trying to put together a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly. Okay, and then you threw in these images from the book. There's one showing the Earth's structure. The mantle, the crust, inner core, outer core, all meticulously labeled. It's like he's giving you a visual aid for his theories.
Laying it all out.
And then those pictures of the cataclysm itself talk about intense. Earthquakes splitting the earth open, volcanoes going nuts, that giant wall of water wiping out everything in its path, like a Hollywood disaster movie.
Thomas definitely knows how to paint a picture with his words. And while it's all very captivating, it's important to remember that he is drawing on real scientific concepts. The Earth's structure, plate tectonics, the role of ice caps. The question is, how do these things all fit together? And could they really cause such catastrophic events on a global scale?
Good point. And then there's that image that really got me, the one with San Francisco and Los Angeles, just gone, buried in mud. Meanwhile, you've got Egypt rising up out of the water.
It's a stark visual, isn't it? A reminder of how quickly things can change, how easily knowledge can be lost, civilizations wiped out in an instant.
Like it never even happened. It's chilling. And speaking of lost knowledge, you included that excerpt from Plato's Timaeus. Remember where the Egyptian priest is talking about those old stories?
Yes.
Stories about great civilizations swallowed by the sea, lost forever, their knowledge vanished.
It's like a universal fear, isn't it? This idea that somewhere beneath the waves there are remnants of these incredible civilizations, their secrets just waiting to be rediscovered. But how does Thomas connect this ancient cataclysm to the Adam and Eve story? I mean, where's the link?
Well, there's a section, he calls it the story, where he digs into the origins of Genesis. He suggests that maybe, just maybe, it all started with a much older story, one that was written in Naga, an ancient language.
Oh, yeah. And he even includes a chart, right? Like a key to understanding all these Naga glyphs and their meanings. Right. It's like he's trying to decode Genesis, trying to uncover a deeper meaning hidden beneath the surface.
So he's saying that the Adam and Eve story, the one we know, it's not the original.
It's possible. He suggests that somewhere along the line, something got lost in translation.
Hold on. So he's saying that maybe the Adam and Eve story as we know it, it's like a game of telephone.
That's one way to look at it. And it's a pretty bold claim, one that's sure to ruffle some feathers. But it does make you think twice about accepting the standard narrative at face value.
Okay, I'm hooked. So we've got this ancient language, Naga, that might hold the key to understanding a completely different version of Genesis. What else? What about this Naga glyph of creation you mentioned?
Ah, yes. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so we've got this ancient language, Naga, possibly holding the key to understanding a completely different version of Genesis. But what about this image? What does Thomas say about the Naga glyph of creation?
Well, it shows three figures. And get this, Thomas thinks they represent a mother continent, some kind of cataclysmic event, and then the survivors, who basically become, Adam and Eve, the start of a whole new civilization.
So this one glyph is like the whole shebang. Lost civilization, bam, disaster, and then humanity rises from the ashes. He's saying Adam and Eve, they weren't the beginning. They were a new beginning.
Exactly. And that is a huge shift in perspective, right? What if what we think of as the history of everything, what if it's incomplete, like we're missing huge chunks of the story?
Wow. You also sent over this excerpt from the Brahma-Vaivarta Purana, a Hindu text. It talks about this world being destroyed by Indra and then a new one being created. Is this another flood myth or what?
It definitely fits that flood myth idea. You see it everywhere, but it's the cycle that gets me. Destruction, creation, over and over. It pops up in myths all over the world. Almost like these ancient stories are tapping into some kind of collective memory. Like deep down, we remember these events.
So Thomas isn't just making this up. He's drawing on like a universal fear, a fear of these massive reset buttons being hit.
Right. And hold on, because it gets even wilder.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. He actually takes Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 and retranslates them, reinterprets them based on these Naga glyphs, calls it the Book of Genesis. I mean, the guy's practically rewriting the Bible.
Whoa, hold up. He's got some serious confidence to just like rewrite the Bible. So what's different? What does his Book of Genesis say?
Okay, so for starters, he says when Genesis talks about creation, it's not talking about the very, very beginning, the universe being born. He thinks it's describing the world being put back together after one of these mega disasters.
So when it says in the beginning, it really means after the disaster.
Exactly. The separation of light and dark, land and sea. It's not creation, it's recovery. The earth healing from this massive event.
Okay, so then where do Adam and Eve fit into all of this?
They're not the first humans. They're the first humans of a new era. The descendants of whoever managed to survive. Maybe they even inherited some knowledge from before.
Wow. Like inheriting tools from your great-great-grandparents, except it's like knowledge of a lost civilization. Incredible.
Yeah.
And he doesn't stop there, does he? He goes on to reinterpret the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, he doesn't think it was a literal garden. He says it represents that lost mother continent, a place of knowledge, wisdom, until, boom, it's gone.
So the serpent, the forbidden fruit, being banished from Eden, it's all metaphor.
For him, absolutely. He ties it all back to the Naga glyphs. The serpent is the flood. The fruit is forbidden knowledge.
Yeah.
And getting kicked out of Eden, that's the survivors escaping as their world is literally falling apart.
It's amazing how he connects all of this stuff. Ancient myths, the Bible, geology. It's like he's weaving this tapestry. And speaking of geology, let's talk about the cataclysm itself. He goes into a lot of detail about what he thinks happened 11,500 years ago. He even mentions Tiahuanaco, That ancient city in South America, the one that seems like it was wiped out in an instant?
Tijuanaco is a fascinating site. It really makes you wonder. The ruins, the way they're put together, it's like they were way ahead of their time. Their knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and then, poof, gone. Something happened there, a natural disaster.
Maybe.
Okay, but was it Thomas's cataclysm? And what about that mother continent in the Atlantic he mentions? Something about the Piri race map. Ah, the Piri race map. Now that's a rabbit hole. It's this Turkish map from the 16th century, and it's caused quite a stir because some people think it shows Antarctica way before it was supposed to have been discovered. As if, whoever made it had knowledge of the world as it was before the ice, before everything changed. Some people even think it's proof of a lost civilization.
Okay, now that is wild. A lost city in South America, a map showing Antarctica before it was frozen. It's almost too much to believe.
It's definitely pushing the limits. But that's part of what makes this so fascinating, isn't it? We have to think critically about all of this. We can't just accept it, but we have to be open to exploring these possibilities, these mysteries. Our understanding of history is always changing. What we think is impossible one day might be tomorrow's groundbreaking discovery.
That's what I love about these deep dives. They make you question everything. So we've got lost civilizations, maps with hidden knowledge, but let's get back to the how. How did this cataclysm happen? You sent a diagram from the book, a cross-section of the Earth, the core, the mantle, and everything, and Thomas uses this to explain how these shifts actually happen. So break it down for us. What's his theory?
Okay, so he thinks it all comes down to the Earth's insides, the molten layers, all that hot stuff down there. He says that when the ice caps get too big, too heavy, it throws the Earth off balance. And when that happens, things get messy. The crust shifts, the poles flip, and that triggers earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. The whole planet gets rearranged.
Yeah, he describes the Earth's crust tumbling around the molten core. It's terrifying, but also kind of beautiful when you think about it.
He's a very visual writer.
Yeah.
And he even suggests that these shifts mess with Earth's magnetic field, which would be bad news for, well, pretty much everything. It could even cause mass extinctions.
Didn't he also talk about sunspots?
He did.
Hmm?
But he didn't think they were the main cause of the shifts.
Mm-hmm.
He said they might play a role, but that it's mostly about what's happening inside the Earth.
So he's saying these huge world-changing events, they're caused by ice.
Well, the buildup and melting of ice.
Yeah.
And it really shows you how everything is connected. Even something we think of as small and insignificant like ice can have these massive global consequences. And while scientists might not agree on everything Thomas says, the idea that the Earth is constantly changing, capable of these dramatic transformations, well, that's pretty relevant today, don't you think?
Especially with climate change and everything. It's like a warning from the past. It's happened before, and it could happen again.
And the fact that the CIA declassified his book, even a sanitized version, that's got to make you wonder.
What were they so interested in?
Right. Were they just exploring all the possibilities? Or is there something more to the story?
Ugh, so many questions. But beyond all the mystery, there's something about his interpretation of the Adam and Eve story that really gets me. It's like this deep desire we all have to understand where we came from.
Absolutely. He's saying that these ancient myths, these stories that have been passed down for generations, maybe they hold more truth than we realize. Echoes of a time before history, when humanity faced incredible challenges and somehow survived.
And that brings up a big question. How much have we lost? How much have we forgotten? And what can we learn from the past, to help us avoid repeating it? You included a list of books he recommends, right? For further research.
Yeah, he calls it supplemental reading. It's a wild mix. You've got books on lost civilizations, ancient mysteries, all sorts of things. There's one called The Lost Americans. It talks about this sudden extinction event in North America. And guess when it happened?
Around 11,500 years ago.
Bingo.
You've got to be kidding me. What else is on the list?
Well, there's one called Worlds in Collision.
Wait, isn't that the book by Immanuel Velikovsky, the one where he claims the planets crashed into each other in ancient times?
The one and only. It was hugely controversial, still is.
Yeah.
A lot of scientists thought he was completely off his rocker. But the fact that Thomas recommends it tells you something, doesn't it?
That he was open to some pretty out there ideas.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder for all of us, right? We should always be willing to question what we think we know, to consider different perspectives, even if they sound crazy at first.
Keep an open mind. I like it.
You never know what you might discover.
And speaking of discoveries, Thomas ends the book with this, quote, "A little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, or it can be a vibrant seed giving rise to verdant forests and awakening sleeping giants." What do you make of
Right.
that?
I think he's saying that knowledge is powerful. It can be used for good or for bad. If you use it the wrong way, it can be dangerous. But if you use it the right way, it can be incredibly powerful. It can change the world.
It's about using knowledge wisely. But what about that last part? About awakening sleeping
I
giants?
think he's talking about those aha moments, those moments when you learn something new and it changes everything. It shakes you out of your comfort zone, makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Like this whole deep dive has done, it's exciting and terrifying all at the same time. It makes you realize just how much we don't know about our own planet, our own history.
Exactly. We're constantly making new discoveries, rewriting the history books, and that's what makes it so exciting.
It really is like stumbling into like a secret library or something, dusty books everywhere, each one maybe holding the key to like rewriting history. And the further we go, the more we realize how much we don't know.
That's the thing about knowledge, isn't it? The more you learn, the more you realize how much is still out there.
Totally. Okay, so let's talk about this cyclical cataclysm idea again. If Thomas is right, if this happens every few thousand years, I mean, what does that even mean for us? Could it happen again?
That's the big question, right? And while none of us can predict the future, I think looking back can give us some clues. Even if his timeline is up for date, the possibility of these huge, devastating events, well, we can't just ignore it.
It's kind of scary when you really think about it. I mean, if entire civilizations were wiped out, what does that mean for us? Can we do anything to prepare?
That's the point, isn't it? This isn't just about ancient history. It's about using what we learned from the past to create a better future. If these events really are cyclical, well, understanding the patterns, the signs, that could be the key to making sure it doesn't happen again. Or at least that we're ready if it does.
That's a heavy responsibility. You know, you included this verse from Psalm 46. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. It's like even way back then, they knew. They knew what the earth was capable of.
It's amazing, isn't it? Throughout history, we've been through so much. Natural disasters, wars, you name it. And yet, here we are.
Still kicking?
Exactly. Humans are incredibly resilient. We adapt, we innovate, we come together when things get tough. It's in our nature.
It's like it's in our DNA or something, this memory of past disasters, this knowledge that we
Yeah.
can survive anything. And all the stuff we've talked about today, the book, the CIA document, the myths, the legends, they all point to that, this like unbreakable spirit of humanity.
It's inspiring, isn't it? This drive to explore, to understand, to keep going no matter what. And as long as we keep doing that, keep asking questions, keep searching for answers, well, there's no telling what we can achieve.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final words for our listeners out there? What's the one thing you hope they take away from all of this?
If I had to pick one thing, it would be to never stop being curious. Thomas's book, whether you agree with him or not, it reminds us that history isn't set in stone. There's always something new to discover, something that might change everything we thought we knew. So keep digging, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep an open mind.
Because the most unbelievable story might turn out to be true. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible deep dive, everyone. And until next time, happy exploring.